A fourth subdiscipline of psychology that is often involved in studying sexuality is evolutionary psychology. Evolutionary psychologists seek to explain how evolution has molded our genetic endowment to favor certain patterns of sexual feelings and behaviors. An idea in evolutionary psychology is that since reproduction is so much more demanding for females than males, genes have evolved that cause females to be very picky in their choice of sex partners. As a result, other genes have evolved that cause males to engage in competitive and risky sexual displays that are intended to influence females' choices. It's well established that men are more likely than women to engage in risky behaviors, but it's not clear whether the risks we take in everyday life are actually sexual displays. A Liverpool University study deals with this question. Evolutionary psychologists at Liverpool U stationed themselves near the campus's busiest crosswalk, and over a period of 3 months they observed how 1,000 men and women crossed the street. They noted how much risk the students took in crossing, that is, whether they crossed when vehicles were approaching, and who else was present when each person crossed. They found that men took more risks than women, and also the presence of women nearby significantly increased the likelihood that a man would attempt a risky crossing. On the other hand, the presence of men nearby did not influence his decision one way or the other. Women, on the other hand, paid little or no attention to who was present, regardless of their sex, when they decided whether or not to cross. The researchers concluded that even a mundane act like crossing a street can be motivated in part by the urge to engage in sexual displays, but this was true only for men. Women do engage in sexual displays, but their displays don't commonly take the form of risk-taking behavior. Clinical psychologists deal with emotional, behavioral, and personality problems that often have a sexual element. A related subgroup is sex therapists who deal specifically with problems that interfere with the enjoyment of sex, things like premature ejaculation and lack of sexual desire. In the U.S., sex therapists may be certified by the Society for Sex Therapy and Research, S-STAR, or by the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, AA-SECT. Some self-described sex therapists have no formal training or accreditation at all. The profession is unregulated in most United States states. Marriage and family counselors deal with problems affecting marriage and other intimate relationships. These are problems that may arise out of sexual difficulties or that, conversely, may arise in non-sexual areas of the relationship but that interfere with sexual relationships. Health psychologists focus on the influence that illnesses such as diabetes and arthritis, or symptoms such as fatigue and pain, may have on sexuality. They will assist survivors of breast cancer, amputation, or heart attacks to cope with how the disease has changed their image of themselves and their relationship with their partner. They will suggest ways to engage in sexual behavior with less pain or discomfort. They also study the psychological aspects of gender inequalities. They may develop programs that empower women to make decisions, for example, to refuse to have sex in cultures in which such decisions have traditionally been an exclusively male prerogative. The next area that we'll look at will be studies of sexuality done by sociologists. Sociologists focus on the connection between sex and society. Sociology is the scientific study of society. Sociologists link sexual behaviors and attitudes of individuals to larger social structures. This is a unique contribution to the study of human sexuality. Sociologists can take a demographic or an ethnographic approach to sexuality. They examine how sexual expression varies with age, race, national origin, religious and political beliefs, place of residence, educational level, etc. Such studies are often carried out by sex surveys. The most famous sex survey was conducted by zoologist Alfred Kinsey and his colleagues at Indiana University in the middle of the 20th century. We'll talk more about Kinsey later in the course. The results were published in two thick, data-rich volumes, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male in 1948 and Sexual Behavior in the Human Female in 1953. This is a picture of Kinsey with some of his colleagues. With the onset of the AIDS epidemic around 1980, the need for detailed information about sexual attitudes and practices spurred a host of new sex surveys. In 1992, the most notable one was a survey conducted by sociologists at the University of Chicago and elsewhere. It was called the National Health and Social Life Survey, also known as NHSLS. It's more up to date than Kinsey and technically superior in a number of respects. For example, it used modern random sampling methods and advanced techniques of statistical analysis made possible by computers. On the other hand, the NHSLS was more limited in scope. It included only about 3,400 interviewees, too few to draw reliable conclusions about small minorities in the country, like African American lesbians. It also failed to include people younger than 18, a group whose sexual activity is of great significance from a public policy perspective, or those over 59 about whose sex we know least. Some critics argue that the NHSLS and other recent surveys failed to elicit completely forthright responses from the interviewees. Thus, they underestimated the prevalence of stigmatized traits and behaviors like promiscuity, homosexuality, and abortion. The NHSLS is now over 15 years old, and to some degree it is being supplemented by smaller, more focused surveys, as well as by the General Social Survey, the GSS, which is an annual University of Chicago survey. The GSS includes questions on sexuality. The National Center for Health Statistics, a branch of the CDC, has also entered the sex survey business. There is also a British survey, the National Survey of Sexual Attitudes and Lifestyles, the NSSAL. There are also magazine-sponsored surveys, and they are more up-to-date and also tend to cover intimate topics that official surveys usually ignore. In 2007, Esquire and Marie Claire magazines commissioned a national random sample survey that came up with all kinds of interesting information about current U.S. sex practices. For example, men rate their partner's looks as the most powerful turn-on, whereas women give first place to kindness, in each case by wide margins. Sociologists are interested in the communities within which sexual relationships are established and maintained. Most Americans are now city dwellers. There is a perception that the city is a place where anything goes, where anyone can hook up with anyone, and where any fantasy can become a fact. Closer inspection shows that this is largely an illusion. Most sexual relationships, even in the city, are tightly constrained by the opportunities and traditions of the community to which the individual belongs. Thus, a city has many distinct sexual markets within which men and women trade. What is the mechanism by which social structures, from family to mass media, mold individual feelings and behaviors? Some think that social structures promote a kind of role-playing behavior in which people are like performers in a play, perhaps a play that is a product of a collective rather than a single playwright. This is referred to as script theory, and an example follows. Egremont wanted to know whether TV viewing influences teenagers' ideas about how to obtain sexual contacts. He specifically wanted to know whether they believed that an overtly sexual strategy like suggestive touching or a romantic strategy like a candlelight dinner was more effective. TV shows, especially those viewed by teens, are filled with examples of both approaches, some successful and some not. He found that between the ages of 12 to 15, boys and girls placed increasing faith in the sexual strategy. This change was related to the adolescent's progress through puberty and was little influenced by TV exposure. He also found that TV viewing lessened girls' beliefs in the romantic strategy, while it strengthened boys' belief in that strategy. Apparently, TV viewing familiarized boys and girls with the sexual scripts thought to be effective with the other sex.